Well, I guess when Nigeria actually achieves that $1 trillion economy, South Africa will not be the biggest on the continent. We saw that news earlier this week. South Africa is now the biggest economy on the continent. That's the position Nigeria used to, I emphasize, used to occupy. But we've since lost that now. I believe we're number 3 now. In fact, Egypt is coming, even threatening South Africa. But let's see perhaps, what did Nigeria do wrong to lose that position? What can it learn from South Africa at this time? And I tell you, competition is really stiff. Countries that you're not thinking about, for instance, Morocco, they're doing really well internally. We're talking of renewed energy. In Morocco, when I was there a couple of months ago, they have their own, they build their own electric cars and they're using it right there. No imports of any kind. When would Nigeria do that? Well, we have right here in the studio Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, to have this conversation. Dr. Yusuf, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
I have to tell you something that happened, behind the camera in the office. So when I was saying that, well, South Africa has overtaken, I was having a conversation with some of my colleagues. South Africa has overtaken Nigeria, and Egypt is very close by, but even Morocco, this giant of Africa that we carry our shoulder for, some people got really, they lost it. I guess they're being patriotic. But I mean, when we look at the numbers, Dr. Yusuf, for instance, I know you did compile this, top African economies by GDP, according to IMF projection. You have the one by GDP, IMF estimate, and 10 economies by Human Development Index, which measures poverty. Really.
Yeah.
Maybe you should speak to this and try to convince some of my colleagues who are watching that we really have a lot of work to do if we want to be the giant of Africa.
We have a lot of work to do. But again, we need to be careful the way we interpret some of this data. Intrinsically, it's not as if the Nigerian economy has contracted so badly. The major issue with this metric of using this dollar-based GDP is that there's a strong exchange rate effect. When we were saying that we were the largest economy, we had $500 billion economy, we were using an exchange rate of about 450 to the dollar. So when we now did this reform, and we now had an exchange rate of 1,500, 1,600, that was the major reason we saw that major contraction in our GDP. It's not as if intrinsically the economy has been so bad. If you had left the exchange rate at 450, which was actually an artificial rate anyway, we'd be talking of an economy of about $600 billion.
Exactly, Dr. Yusuf. Even you have said it. You have said it. That if we had left it at an artificial rate.
Yeah.
So it seems like even then, when we were boasting to be the top, it was actually an artificial position.
It was.
Because we should ensure that our currency has value. South African rand, I think it's about 15 to $1. And it's still the dollar rate. So let's tell ourselves the truth. We need to do something to give more value to our currency so that our true position can actually be enviable.
Yes. So we have gone through some major correction now. So we are now seeing the reality of what our economy is. And that is why I also presented a slide that speaks to purchasing power parity. Because the purchasing power parity actually reflects better what the value of your economy is in terms of what.
Okay, that's the top 5 African economies by GDP, PPP, IMF estimates.
Yes. I mean, if you look at those numbers, we are already at even over $2 trillion US dollars.
Well, Egypt is ahead of us there.
Yes, using the PPP. And the PPP metric is to underscore the value of your currency in real terms, not necessarily in comparison to the dollar. And the point to make here is that what $1 equivalent can buy in Nigeria, $1 cannot buy it in the United States. So when you compare the purchasing power of your currency with what happens in other countries, you appreciate better the value of the economy. And that is what the PPP, the purchasing power parity metric is showing. And we look at the numbers, we are not doing bad. Even we have even surpassed the 1 trillion.
South Africa.
You know, Egypt is, and by the end of this year, I can tell you, even this South Africa that we are celebrating, based on these numbers that we are seeing, based on the GDP growth that we are experiencing, because the last GDP numbers we had, we did a GDP growth of close to 4%. South Africa is doing 1.4. Okay. That was even Q3 2025.
Okay, Dr. Yusuf, let's look at the structure and all of that.
Yes.
Compare Nigeria and South Africa.
Yeah.
So we see, for instance, in Nigeria, oil and gas dominates. It's a major export earner. Telecoms contributed, we just spoke about telecoms just before you came on, contribute 14% of GDP. Agriculture employs large share of population. There's a growing fintech and digital economy. There's heavy FX and imports dependency. Now, for South Africa in that range, we see South Africa has a more diversified economy, which speaks to sustainability. It has a strong mining sector, gold and platinum. It has advanced financial services sector. Its manufacturing base is developed, and tourism is a major contributor. So when we look at it, I mean, these are the nitty-gritties that add to the GDP at the end of the day. When we look at it from that perspective.
Well, the difference is not so much. When you talk about the diversification of the economy, the challenge we have in this economy is that when you talk about export competitiveness, when you talk about the revenue potentials and productivity across sectors, we have that lopsidedness. But when you look at the GDP numbers, even this oil and gas we talk about, the contribution to GDP, I think, is just about 20% or even less. You know, the services sector is contributing close to 56% of GDP. So within the construct of the GDP structure, we have an economy that is fairly diversified. Even agriculture, with all its problems, is contributing about 25% to GDP. You know, the services sector is contributing about 57%.
And real estate too.
Real estate is doing well. Telecoms, even our financial services. You know, they are doing very well in terms of diversification. But the challenge we have is that, particularly for the real sector of the economy, productivity is a major issue. And that is where South Africa has an edge. When you look at their manufacturing sector, they are doing very well. They can export. But what can we export from our manufacturing space here? Our manufacturing sector is dependent primarily on domestic markets because of all the structural issues that they are grappling with. Then when you look at their tourism, it's also doing very well. Now with all the negativities, Boko Haram, kidnapping, how do you attract tourists?
But South Africa also has its own security issues.
Yes.
There are many incidents of violence.
There is violence and all of that. But we have to be honest. It's not as pronounced as what you have.
Or is it a matter of perception?
No. You know, there is some convergence between perception and reality as far as this. Because, I mean, look at all the insecurity problems, that we have. So, and these things, of course, hit global headlines. Not so much the way South Africa's issues also hit the headlines. So, all of these things give South Africa an edge. But I can tell you, with the current traction that the Nigerian economy is gaining now, in terms of investment growth, in terms of the stability of the macro variables, in terms of the level of investors' confidence, it's only a matter of time before we overtake South Africa. I can tell you.
Okay, Egypt is there too. No, Egypt is pursuing South Africa, even as we speak.
Yes, I know. But in terms of growth potentials, we have better growth potential that we are just unlocking.
Because most of their potentials have been unlocked.
Exactly. Because they have better infrastructure and all of that. So they are already moving. But we are just unlocking some of those. We are just dismantling the barriers.
I hope we are dismantling it already.
So things are really coming up. So if you don't see any major reversal, if there is no major disruption to the current trend, of course, we'll be there.
Okay, let's look at the market, the financial market, the financial and capital market. So we see, of course, the NGX has been shining in recent times. I think mostly since President Tinubu came on. For one reason or the other, I think the latest driver, major driver, is the pension funds. Since they increased their limits, so they are
Pension
participating.
Funds, portfolio flows are also contributing a lot. Yes.
Okay. All right. So for the Nigerian Exchange Limited, growing liquidity, banking and telecom dominance there. For Johannesburg is the largest and most sophisticated exchange on the continent. South Africa leads in capital market depth, pension assets. We will overtake them with pension. And financial sophistication. And then, of course, talking about for the currency, we've talked about the volatility of Naira, which has majorly stabilized now. But their rand is more market-driven. It's volatile, but it's still liquid. Inflation for both countries higher and structural for Nigeria. It's moderate but persistent in South Africa. Interest rate is elevated in Nigeria, as we know. We just had a 50 basis points cut, but that hasn't still brought it down. And also, it's high in South Africa, but it has a more stable framework. Now, let's look at one of those slides that you talked about, the projection from the IMF and what to expect. Top 5 African economies by GDP by IMF projection. South Africa is still leading there, followed by Egypt and Nigeria, number 3. But you are very optimistic that if we continue in this trend...
Of course, if you look at the growth numbers, we are doing far better than these other countries in terms of growth. We are doing growth of...
This projection is for this year, 2026.
Yes. We are doing better because we are doing almost 4% GDP growth. And from looking at all the indicators, if all these political issues don't disrupt things significantly, I mean, we are on the way to catching up with all of these people. But look at our results.
Yeah, but the number we have now is the gross reserve.
It's the gross
reserve. Not the net reserve.
Yes, even the net results, the last data we were given was over $30 billion. That is significant. You know, and with the current situation, in fact, I expect the CBN now to be using the opportunity of the appreciation of the currency rather than be aiming to bring the dollar to 1,000 naira to
Oh, you saw the 1,000 naira projection?
Yes. We should be mopping up to build reserves. So that by June or so, our reserves should be getting close to $60 billion.
Net.
Yes. Because this will not continue. And the whole essence of building reserves is to prepare yourself against any future shock. Anything can go wrong with oil price. Anything can go wrong with the portfolio flows. Because even these reserves we are celebrating, there are elements of portfolio flows that are there. So these are vulnerabilities. So once we have the opportunity, as we have now, and I think I heard the CBN governor mention that they are now even net buyers of foreign currency than selling to the market, which is good. So we have a great opportunity to deal with that. But coming back to this issue of GDP, God, there's a slide there about Human Development Index.
Yes. Because
at the end of the day, the economy is about human beings.
Yeah, that's the top 10 African economies by Human Development Index. UNDP.
Look at the countries that are leading there. Even South Africa that we are celebrating is number 10.
Yes. So Seychelles is first.
Yes.
That's a quiet but strong country.
Strong country.
Yes.
You can live welfare, you have peace of mind.
And this is what gives us our poverty index.
Exactly. This relates a lot more to welfare. So we should talk less about $1 trillion economy. Let us face
this is a pre-election year, Dr. Yusuf. So you don't expect us to talk less about it.
No. But I'm talking about what will bring value.
Okay.
To the people. Human Development Index. That indicator is as important, if not more important,
as the GDP.
As the GDP.
And a lot of conversation that we had last year, 2025, we saw impressive macroeconomic indices, but we are still looking for how to translate that to the micro, which is what this data captures.
We are number 28 in Africa. I mean, that is not good enough. South Africa is number 10. And you can see all the countries that are above us. Even US, that is the biggest economy globally, is about number 17 when it comes to Human Development Index. They are spending so much money on weapons, on this, on that. But they also have issues with the welfare of their own people. So it is important that while we aim for bigger economy in terms of GDP, we should at the same time, with equal emphasis, be focusing on human development issues. Because that is more important. In many of the advanced economies, when the citizens are talking or are praising the economy, they hardly talk about GDP. They talk about jobs. They talk about affordability. These are the things that matter. So the emphasis for me should move away, because $1 trillion economy or $10 trillion economy is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And the end is the impact
on the welfare.
On the welfare of the people. The economy is about human beings.
Dr. Yusuf, you know what I mean? When I saw the news that there's a rescheduling of the timetable, elections timetable, we'll now be having the president and the National Assembly election January 16, and then I think about a week or so, first week of February, we'll be having the one for the states and all of that. And already, even though officially a campaign is supposed to start now, formally it was supposed to be in November, now campaigns should start in August.
So the campaign has already started.
Exactly my point. Exactly my point. So I'm thinking all this what we are saying, are you sure we're not just talking to ourselves? Because as it is now, politicians have seen that how many months do they have? I don't know if they're...
Yes, but what is important is for those who are in charge of managing the economy to be focused on the economy, to not be distracted. We can have some distraction on the fiscal side, because it's about budgeting, it's about how to source money for elections and so on. But on the monetary side, I'm a lot more comfortable. There's a lot of focus, there's a lot of, proper positioning to ensure that we maintain this macroeconomic stability. So if the key managers of the economy are focused, the distraction that this election thing will cause may not be as much as we are anticipating. I think we seem to be overrating all this proportionately.
Past experience.
Yes. It may not be as bad, really. Because the economy is already taking a very strong footing. The fundamentals are building up.
All right. We hope for the best as we prepare for the elections. Thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Ini. Thank you.
Let's take a break now. When we come back, today is World NGO Day. Why do we even have to discuss that? We'll talk about that after the break. Please stay with us.